welcomes all, strangers and friends. God's love is strong and it never ends. God welcomes all, strangers and friends. God's love is strong and it never ends. Welcome. Welcome to this meeting of the United Reformed Church National Synod of Scotland. Welcome if you are participating in the meeting online, viewing the live stream, or you're here in person at Rutherglen. Welcome if you are a member of Synod, a visitor, one of our ecumenical guests, a staff member, or the all-important IT people who are supporting us. Welcome if you are here for the first time, or if you have been on many occasions. Welcome if you have begrudgingly given up your Saturday, especially when it's such a nice day, or whether you are energized by how the Spirit may move among us, or find yourself somewhere in between. Welcome, everyone. Let's greet one another as we sing together once more. God welcomes all, strangers and friends. God's love is strong and it never ends. God welcomes all, strangers and friends. God's love is strong and it never ends. And so may God, the Creator, gather us together and bless us. God, the Redeemer, guide us in our meeting. God, the Sustainer, equip us in our collective journey of faith and witness as the National Synod of Scotland. The hymns and songs that we'll share in our Synod meeting today all come from the recently published supplement to the Church of Scotland 4th Hymnary, which is entitled God Welcomes All. There'll be some new tunes and words, but some familiar tunes too. So let us worship God as we sing together, and please remain seated or stand as you feel most comfortable. God, may our church reflect your grace to all who enter here. We join together in prayer. Let us pray. Ever-living, ever-present God, we gather in your name. Drawn from across our nation, we come together as part of the body of Christ, united yet diverse, celebrating our sense of being family together in the National Synod of Scotland. We thank you for the opportunities our meeting brings, sharing in worship, discerning your word to us as we conduct our life together, receiving reports about the use of our resources and making decisions about our collective life, making and renewing friendships. May your Spirit be with us as we meet, enlivening our discussions and prompting us to action. Jesus, our companion, you have called each of us by name, and we have responded to your invitation, follow me. As we recall the period of your temptation in the desert, give us the faith and courage to follow you in the way of active engagement for justice in our world and an equal sharing of all that brings fullness of life to each human being. Save us from the temptation of making gods of our possessions or status, misusing the power we hold over others. Guide us to an ever deeper understanding of our joyful dependence upon you. Collaborating Spirit, as we gather as Synod, model amongst us a community of grace, where all are heard and respected, where all are encouraged and equipped, where all are included and valued. Cherish us and challenge us, inspire us and disquiet us, so that we can truly be your disciples, learning as we follow and trusting you each day. Gracious God, as we come together, we do so acknowledging that we have often failed to live as your disciples. We have failed to live as we wish and as you would have us live. We confess our failings in being community, our lack of sensitivity, our lack of understanding, our lack of openness, our lack of forgiveness. We confess the times when we are too eager to be better than others, when we are too rushed to care, when we are too tired to bother, when we are too lazy to really listen, when we are too quick to act from motives other than love. Gracious God, in your love, renew us and help us to hear Jesus' word to us. Your sins are forgiven. Follow me. And so, as children of God, forgiven, loved, and free, let us join together in the Lord's Prayer using the words on the screen. Our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come. Your will be done on earth as in heaven. Give us today our daily bread. Forgive us our sins as we forgive those who sin against us. Save us from the time of trial and deliver us from evil. For the kingdom, the power, and the glory are yours, now and forever. Amen. We turn to our reading from Scripture, and it's going to be read for us by one of my longest-standing ecumenical friends here in Scotland, Colin Brown, from the United Free Church of Scotland.
The reading is from 1 Peter 3, verses 8 to 16. Finally, all of you have unity of spirit, sympathy, love for one another, a tender heart and a humble mind. Do not repay evil for evil or abuse for abuse, but on the contrary, repay with a blessing. It is for this that you were called, that you might inherit a blessing. Those who desire life and desire to see good days, let them keep their tongues from evil and their lips from speaking deceit. Let them turn away from evil and do good. Let them seek peace and pursue it. For the eyes of the Lord are on the righteous, and his ears are open to their prayer. But the face of the Lord is against those who do evil. Now, who will harm you if you are eager to do what is good? But even if you do suffer for doing what is right, you are blessed. Do not fear what they fear, and do not be intimidated, but in your heart sanctify Christ as Lord. Always be ready to make your defense to anyone who demands from you an account of the hope that is in you. Yet do it with gentleness and reverence. In this is the word of the Lord.
As we gather here today, many of us may feel that hope is in short supply. As we look around the world in which we live, we recognise that the norms of political discourse, which have been in place since the end of the Second World War, have been upended in the last fortnight. As we observe the continuing conflict in Ukraine and the very real possibility of breakdown of ceasefire agreements between Hamas and the State of Israel, as we fear the escalation towards potential trade wars and the effects for the global economy, as we experience the ongoing climate emergency and recall other regional conflicts which have long since disappeared from our TV screens, and accept the cost of utilities increasing again, together with rises in council tax, the outlook, locally, nationally, internationally, looks particularly bleak. Hope is in short supply for many millions of the world's people, and we may share that view. So how do we respond as people of faith in the world in which we find ourselves? As I've reflected over recent days, there seem to me to be two key elements to my response, which are intertwined. The first is to take the context seriously, to try to understand the world in which we live, to acknowledge that we may not be able to provide answers, but that as part of the global community, we have a responsibility to understand as best we can what is happening in our world. That seems to me to be a crucial first step in loving our neighbour. I was talking with John McPake, the ecumenical officer of the Church of Scotland, earlier this week, and he told me that he had just finished reading The Art of the Deal by Donald Trump. He'd found that an entry point in beginning to understand the mindset that President Trump is bringing to his presidency and the way he's engaging, particularly in foreign policy. If governments across the world are to engage with President Trump and find anything positive coming from that, then perhaps they too need to read The Art of the Deal. Perhaps we all need to read it. Jesus often talked about discerning the signs of the times. And in our time, when everything seems to be moving rapidly, is in a state of disruption, doing all we can to understand the world in which we are living seems to me a helpful first step in responding to what is happening around us. But there has to be something more than simply understanding or gaining knowledge of the world in which we live, because that could all too easily lead us down a pathway of despair, of even greater anxiety, of being completely overwhelmed by the context in which we find ourselves. And as a person of faith, That something more for me is hope. As we heard in our scripture reading, Peter encourages his readers always to be ready to make their defence to anyone who demands from them an account of the hope that is within them, and to do that with gentleness and reverence. Peter is offering this advice to the recipients of his letter, who it is generally thought lived around the Black Sea region sometime in the 1st century. We do not know the church communities to whom Peter writes, but we do know that they experience suffering, and so the letter speaks directly to them and encourages them in the midst of their suffering as to how they should live. Peter offers hope as the basis for a Christian lifestyle. He encourages the communities to be alert in the face of their suffering. They are to be marked out by a living hope which has such impact upon their lives that even those who are imposing the suffering upon them may ask about the hope they demonstrate. This is why Peter encourages the believers always to be ready with an account of the hope that is within them, and to offer it with gentleness and reverence. We may not be directly facing the persecution of the early communities to whom Peter wrote, but the context has some familiarity. It seems bleak. Oppression is on the increase. The dignity of human beings is being diminished. And so therefore the call to have hope seems equally important today. In more recent times, the theologian perhaps most associated with hope was the German Lutheran Jürgen Moltmann, who passed away last year. He writes, "Christian hope is not a waiting or a matter of wait and see. It is creative expectation of the things God has promised with the resurrection of Christ. Those who passionately await something prepare themselves and their community for it. The person who hopes for the realm of freedom will desire liberation from political repression and economic exploitation here and now. The person who hopes for the righteousness and justice of the new earth will respect the earth here and now. The person who hopes for the eternally living life will already be seized here and now by this unique, glowing, eternal life, and will make life live wherever they can. Christian hope is not a matter of wait and see. It is a creative expectation of the things that God has promised with the resurrection of Christ. Those who passionately await something prepare themselves and their community for it. This is living the hope within you. It is being prepared always to give an account of the hope that is within you. The creative expectation of the things that God has promised with the resurrection of Christ gives us hope when all around seems bleak and disintegrating. Through the resurrection of Christ, we and the whole created order are reconciled to God, are drawn into the very being of God, sharing in the life of the Trinity, the community of love, which is good news for us and for all the world. We are called to live by that love. As Peter says to his readers, have unity of spirit, sympathy, love for one another, a tender, humble mind. Do not repeat evil for evil or abuse for abuse. Repay with a blessing. In your hearts, sanctify Jesus Christ as Lord. Living the hope that is within us means that we're called to a radically different way of living than we are seeing demonstrated on the world stage in these days. It calls us to model in our own lives the life of Jesus, with whom we walk the way to Jerusalem, to the cross, to the tomb, and then to the garden. Hope demands of us a response which is predicated on the fullness of life that Jesus offers to all who follow him. Maltman says that those who passionately await something prepare themselves and their community for it. And so to our agenda for today. Living the hope within us was the theme that we chose to mark this 25th anniversary year of the National Synod of Scotland and the 25th year of the United Reformed Church in its present form, long before any of the world events of the past couple of months were known to us, and also before the agenda of this Synod meeting was known. But looking at our agenda, this is an agenda which for me gives expression to our collective living the hope within. It's an agenda that speaks of preparing ourselves and our community as a synod for hopeful living. The work we're doing on safeguarding is about the way in which we continue to relate to each other, seeking to uphold the dignity of each person and holding each other accountable in making sure that those who care for the more vulnerable are proper people to do so. The conversations we'll have around the Mission and Ministry Fund, the challenges of financial resources, are about how we support the gift of ministers of word and sacrament to best enable the flourishing of our church communities and share the good news of God's love. The resolution we have to celebrate with Christian Aid its 80 years of offering practical action, advocacy, campaigning and prayer takes on new significance in light of the UK government's decision to cut the international aid budget. The environmental policy challenges us as a synod to take decisions which mean that we may not only live in hope, but those of future generations may too. A church with people at the margins asks us to pledge our support and the use of our resources so that those on the margins may have the same opportunity to flourish as those in the centre. Our agenda today is a testament to the reality that we are people who live the hope that is within us, and that we are continuing to prepare ourselves in creative expectation of the things God has promised with the resurrection of Christ. Always be ready to make your defence to anyone who demands from you an account of the hope that is within you, yet do it with gentleness and reverence. As we meet today as Synod, may this be an opportunity for us to discern more of the signs of the times in which we live and to respond to them in hope, giving voice to the hope which is within us, preparing ourselves and our communities as we wait in creative expectation for the things God has promised with the resurrection of Christ, fullness of life for all. Amen. When we gather as Synod, one of the things that we do is to remember elders and deacons of local churches and ministers of word and sacrament who have passed away since our previous meeting. And so I invite you, if you're able, to please stand. Before you, O God, we remember the ones who went before us, who followed you in faith and hope, who in their ministries as ministers of word and sacrament, deacons and elders, offered their service to you and shared your love for the world. May the stories of their lives show the richness of your grace. And so we remember with thanksgiving the Reverend Georgina Brotherton, who served in Colchester, Leyland, Leeds, Chippenham, Malmesbury and Wootton Bassett, and who lived in retirement in the Isle of Whithorn. the Reverend Ian Bird, who served in the Presbyterian Church of Southern Africa, Harrogate and Bromley, and who lived in retirement in Haddington. The Reverend Mark Wilson, who served with the Church of Scotland overseas and then in Luton, and lived in retirement in Longnidrey. We give thanks for the lives of the following deacons and elders whose deaths have been notified to the Synod office: Margaret Ann Aitchison from Stewarton, Bob Dalgleish, Granton United Church, Alison Fiddler, Peadykirk, Richard Mackenzie and Elizabeth Russell, Giffnock, Lindsay Weir from Drumchapel, Essenside, Liz Patterson and Barbara Lindsay, Rutherglen. O God, who is the same yesterday, today, and forever, receive our thanksgiving for those who have ministered amongst us. Comfort all who mourn the death of loved and respected ones. Help us to place our trust in you, Alpha and Omega, source, guide, and goal of all that is. Amen. Living the hope within you is an act of courage and defiance. And throughout history, in social movements for justice, a significant expression of that courage and defiance has been in song. Think of the tradition of spiritual songs which emerged from the experience of African American slaves, or more recently, the songs which arose from the experience of apartheid. We're going to sing another of the hymns from God Welcomes All, and it's entitled, Sing a New World into Being. Now, lots of you know that I love to sing, and if I could sing a new world into being, then I would definitely do so. But this is not a cosy sentiment. This hymn stands in that same tradition of courage and defiance and a commitment to God's vision of a new world. John's going to play the melody through for us once before we sing together. Our meeting has begun in worship, and as we move to business, let us affirm our commitment to each other for this meeting time and moving forward. We will grow together in humility, gentleness, and patience. We will nurture each other in faith. We will bear with one another in love. We will make every effort to maintain the unity of the Holy Spirit in the bond of peace, so that we may faithfully proclaim the gospel of Christ. We have some additional welcomes to make to particular people today, and so our first is a welcome to this place, and I'm just going to ask John if he will very quickly, not so much welcome us, but give us a few directions about our use of this building when we're here. Thank you.
Good morning, and I will welcome you to Rotherglen URC. Very easily, if someone starts shouting fire very loudly, then please make your way either out of the fire exit at that far end of the building or through this door here and out the glass doors that you came in. Toilets are also through that door and first on your left, and there's male, female and accessible toilets there. Tea, coffee, the ladies that provided the tea, coffee this morning have left the flask there, so at any point you're able to go and fill up your cups if you wish. And there's also some bottles of water, help yourself to them. And I think that's everything from me.
Thank you, John. We are going to welcome a number of people who have joined us today, and we are grateful for their presence with us. So I think we have two newly ordained elders who are joining us for Synod for the first time. Sandra Black from Greenock West, yes, and also Eileen Miller from Stewarton. She's online. Okay, Sandra, I'm just going to wave at you. Okay, lovely to have you with us. And also, Eileen, I hope that I can't see you at the moment, but I hope you can see me. And it's also lovely to have you. A particular part of our tradition is to welcome ecumenical guests amongst us. And we welcome them not just as visitors, but as full members of Synod who are encouraged to participate and to vote as we come to things. So I'm going to ask John if he will introduce our ecumenical guests. And this time I will wander around and do an official handshake. Oh, sorry. Jürgen Moltmann was a Reformed theologian, not a Lutheran. I forgot that bit from my dissertation of almost 30 years ago.
I was corrected by the student. Moderator, we're delighted to have 7 ecumenical guests with us today, and I'm going to just introduce them in no particular order, just in the order in which they're in here. But someone who has been in previous years, going back a few years now, Reverend Francis Bloomfield, representing the Baptist Union of Scotland, and we're delighted that Francis is with us yet again. Good to see you. The moderator of the General Assembly of the United Free Church, everyone should stand. Colin Brown, who was a contemporary of mine at New College, Edinburgh, though he looks a lot younger than I feel. Yeah. Daniel Jack has come to us from the Scottish Episcopal Church. He's a member of their congregation in Aberfoyle, which is in the Diocese of St Andrews, Dunblane and Dunkeld, or Dunkeld and Dunblane, one or other, but welcome. And did I understand that you are joining the EMU group? So welcome also to that, and we look forward to your contributions over many years to come. From the Congregational Federation of Scotland, in Scotland, we're delighted to welcome again, I think, Margaret McGuinness, who's secretary. And it's good to have you with us, Margaret. From representing the Religious Society of Friends, an Episcopalian who worships regularly with our congregation in Kirkwall. So he sort of embodies ecumenism. Derek McLean, who has come all the way down from Kirkwall just to be with us today, and so those watching in Kirkwall can just welcome. All right. So that's it's the Quaker meeting that meets in the church. Well, good. There's a mistake next. We're supposed to be welcoming the Reverend Mary Welsh. Now, unless something very dramatic has happened to the Roman Catholic Church in the last 24 hours. But Mary, again, a long-standing friend of the Synod, representing the Bishops' Conference of Scotland, and the ecumenical officer. And another ecumenical officer from the Methodist Church in Scotland, Reverend James Patron Bell, is with us also. So it's good to have you. So, good. That's me. I'll go home now.
And they were not on the list, but there were two folks that I would just like to give another welcome to, two of ministers who have retired since the last kind of meeting of our synod, and it's great that they are both here today. So firstly, and I should have said this while I was away back up there because he's right at the back, Alan Gibbon, who is retired from chaplaincy with NHS Tayside, is in Dundee. I'll just wave at you, Alan, thank you in the interest of time. And also a return to the synod for Ken Forbes. So Ken, it's great to have you back, and welcome to our meeting today. Excellent. This meeting, we're very grateful to Sanctus Media, who are supporting us with the online participation as well as the live streaming. I'm just going to ask Neil to give a few words of advice for those who are online.
Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
I interlope from the Church of Scotland, just to add to the list of folks notionally present here this morning. We're live streaming our meeting this morning to folks in churches and congregations up and down the land who are interested, and also to folks on Zoom who are delegates, of course, and are participating rather than just watching. Perhaps you could wave at the back to the folks on Zoom, and the folks on Zoom could wave to us. We can see them on the screen. Yay, very good. That means the audio is going both ways at least. That's super. We're also recording this morning. If for any reason that's an issue for anyone, please come and see us at the back. By and large, the folks who are sitting here, it'll be backs of heads. It's only the folks at the front who are seen full face on camera. But just to let you know, if there are any challenges, do just come and see us at the back, and we will work with you to see how we can resolve that. Folks on Zoom, you can indeed see and hear and see and be heard. If for any reason something's happening in your home, feel free to turn your camera off. But otherwise, if you can leave it on, because it's great to see you and to acknowledge your presence with us. If at any point you would like to make a contribution at an appropriate moment, please do raise your digital hand. You can feel free to give that a go just now. If you want to practice, we won't invite you to speak, but if you want a little practice putting your hand up, James will see that at the back. If that's not working for you or you can't find your digital hand, then just unmute yourself at an appropriate moment and call for the moderator. And the moderator will listen and may invite you to speak, or indeed may not. It would be helpful at that point if you could introduce yourself, because otherwise you're just a voice in the ether. if you would like to speak and the digital hand isn't working. When it comes time to make decisions, like the folks in the room, if you can raise your digital hand to do that, and that's probably for most of our resolutions this morning. You can just raise your hand and we'll count. We recognise that some of you are together in one place, and so there are several of you, but you can only raise one hand at once, of course. So you can use the chat to the URC Tech channel and just let us know how many hands you're putting up. And that will be great, and we'll kind of count those together. If a numerical vote is necessary, then we will use Zoom polls, and there will be one of those when you come to choose a General Assembly moderator. So we're going to have a little practice at that, and the folks in the room can join in as well when we come to do that. So a poll will appear on your screen if you're entitled to vote, and the motion is, this synod prefers tea to coffee. So you can now vote for or against. Folks in the room, hands for tea. Hands for coffee. Oh, I think the coffees might have it. James, how are the Zoomers? Oh, half and half. Okay, half and half, fair enough. Any technical issues, folks on Zoom, you can use the chat to the URC Tech host, and we'll try our best to sort you out and make sure all votes are counted. Lastly, if you can stay muted on Zoom so that we don't hear the dog or the washing machine or the doorbell, that would be great. Occasionally, if you've accidentally unmuted, we can mute you for you. So please don't be upset if you see the message your host has muted you. It just means we don't really want to hear what's happening in the house if it's not related to the meeting. But you can unmute yourself at any point to make your contribution. If you can keep the chat free from other conversations so that folks who need tech support can get it. So we'll just use the chat for tech support only. And lastly, for folks in the room, there is a handheld mic which we can bring to you at moments of contribution. Whilst your voice may be loud enough to be heard in here, they will not hear it in Orkney. So if you can be patient and just wait for the handheld mic to come to you, it means the folks at home will be able to hear you as well. I think that's everything. Thank you, Moderator.
Thank you, Neil. Thank you. So we move now to briefing notes and apologies, and I'm going to ask Jan, our clerk, to introduce that.
Good morning, Synod members, Zoomers, guests, whatever category you want to put yourself in. I'd like to just begin by asking you to draw your attention, really, to the briefing notes that were sent out. One or two other things just to add to what Neil has been saying. Please remember that when you wish to speak, could you please say your name and from which church or synod position you are wishing to speak from. You should all attendees have access to the blue and orange cards with green cards if you are a voting person. Now, the moderator will put us right when she asks if you are warm to something or cold to something, and she will also remind us which colour, which is the green, for when we wish to conduct a vote. We will be advising you before the end of today as to whether a Zoom is required for tomorrow. If it is, you will find the Zoom link in section 15 of your briefing notes that were sent. If there are any further questions regarding the briefing notes, please do go and ask Gemma. Moderator, I have a few apologies to record, and for the individuals that have sent in apologies, from Dorothy Anderson, Gordon Armstrong, Andy Braunston, and Gordon Smith. There are a further few churches not able to be represented today, and that is from Carluke, Drumchapel, Grahamston United, Granton United, Montrose and Thurso. If there are any others that you are aware of, would you please speak to Ailey, who is sitting right down here in the front, who is our minute taker. Ailey, would you mind just standing up so everyone can see who you are? Thank you. Represented online are Giffnock, Peadykirk, Saughton Hall, Dunfermline, Augustine, Hamilton, Greenock East, Nairn, Annan, Fraserburgh, as well as any other visitors. So we do welcome you all. And the roll of attendees will accompany the minutes of this meeting. Moderator, may I move to the minutes, please? Now, the minutes of the previous meeting of Saturday, the 14th of September 2024, they have been circulated since late autumn. We did receive a few grammatical and typos. Please, Ailey, don't worry about this. But we did receive a few amendments which Gemma has inserted. If anyone has any further, would you please see Gemma after this meeting? If there are no other questions regarding any accuracy, then I invite the moderator to receive these minutes, please.
So any typographical errors will be sorted out later. Are there any questions concerning the substance of the minute that's not been previously identified? I'm not seeing anybody in the room or anybody online. Thank you. Therefore, can I ask voting members to show with their green cards whether you accept the minutes? Thank you. And those online, if you could indicate with a hand. I think the minutes are clearly accepted. Thank you.
Moderator, may I move to the appointment of tellers? Thank you. It is our custom to appoint tellers for each synod meeting. Moderator, I propose Gemma Walker and Sarah McGinty as tellers, with Jackie Kyle as convener of tellers. Could I ask for those three people to stand, please, just so that everybody knows who you are? Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Again, I'm going to ask if there's any substantive comment, question in relation to that. Otherwise, we move straight to a vote. I don't see anybody wishing to speak in the room or online. Therefore, again, voting members, could you please show with green cards or with hand acceptance of appointing the tellers? Thank you. So we're going to move now to the Synod Executive Committee report, which is paper A, and the resolutions that are attached to that. Sadly, Susan Henderson, the convener, has had a family bereavement and is not able to be with us today, and so Jan, as the Synod Clerk, is going to present the report. Thank you, Jan.
Right, paper A is the report of the Synod Executive Committee. Since this report was written, the following requires further input, and so I propose that we go through the report highlighting the additions or further information that I need to bring to you. There are also 3 resolutions to address from this paper, which I will invite the moderator to lead us through at the end of the presentation of this report. So if you have the report in front of you, there is no more to report at this stage on paragraph 1, but on paragraph 2, It does state that envisages the dates for 2026 Synod meetings. They are there, they are not confirmed as yet, as also is neither the venues. But please just pencil them in readiness for next year's diary. Paragraph 3 is the 25th anniversary celebrations, and I have pleasure in inviting Fiona Bennett on behalf of the task group for this to say a few words.
Thank you, Jan. So Fiona Bennett, Augustine Church, but part of the task group looking at this. It's a pleasure to be with you this morning, Synod. The Synod this year is 25 years old. Can any of you remember anything you were doing when you were 25 years old? Go on, David. What were you doing when you were 25 years old? I'll repeat it out for the mic.
I think I was probably having a look around Berlin.
David was having a look around Berlin. Anyone else? What were you doing at 25 years old? Ailey, what were you doing? Getting married. You were getting married. I was also getting married at 25 years old and was also ordained. One more. Anybody else remember what you were doing at 25 years old?
We were in Australia.
You were in Australia. You were in Australia. Thank you very much indeed. 25 years is quite an interesting point in life, isn't it? Because you're an adult, but you're not quite, you might, but you're not quite an adult. Thank you, Lindsay. Yeah, absolutely. Well, this year, the Synod is at that point. We are 25 years old, as within part of the URC. To mark and to celebrate this, we are holding a day of celebration and encouragement on June the 14th in Perth for all of us to come together and to be joined by friends from across the URC and our ecumenical partners. So it should be a really encouraging day. The theme for the day comes from the reading and the sermon that our moderator shared with us this morning. It comes from 1 Peter 3:15, giving an account, a defence or an account of the hope that is within us. We hope that through the rich opportunities which the day offers of worship, workshops, speakers, food, quiet spaces and time together, we will remember, celebrate and be able to share that hope that is within us as disciples of Jesus today. So, I'll come back to the mic. You've seen the publicity, our fabulous logo. And you'll see from the flyers on your tables, I'd invite you to pick up one of the flyers that looks like this. I'm not sure, can people online see something? Is there something in the, is there a slide? Okay. If not, people online, something will be available. But you can see from this sheet, we've got the workshops which we are going to be offering throughout the day. There'll be a song workshop, which Mike Holroyd will read. Commitment Through Justice is Sally Foster Fulton, who people will know as a former moderator of the Church of Scotland, works for Christian Aid, a fabulous speaker. We've got Miles Dunnett coming up from London, who has been part of the Church Life Review, who'll be looking at, as in the denominational one. And we've got Scott Spurlock, who people will know here. He lectures in church history in Glasgow University, has been a member through in the East, and is a very, very able storyteller as well as historian. And he is going to be talking about understanding our story. And we've also got the comms team coming up from London, and they will be doing, they'll have a stall and stuff, but they're also going to be offering a workshop on communicating the good news. All of that will be hosted in the midst of a day with a delicious lunch, space for people to be quiet if you need to do that, and to pray meditatively with resources, and also space to socialise, all held together in worship. And the worship, there'll be morning worship, and then at the 3 o'clock worship will be the point in the day which will be Zoomed, and we'll invite people from all over to come and to join in our last hour together. It would be difficult to do the whole day online, so we made a decision that that's the way we do it. So anybody from anywhere can join in that last celebration together, in which Sally Foster Fulton will be preaching at that service at 3. Why not travel? As a group, you could hire a bus. And you know what? There are some funds which might be available through Synod in order to do that. Some areas have already looked into that. Is there anybody here who's part of a group that have hired something somewhere? Go and wave at us. Yeah, there are already, see, some people, there's a couple that's already begun to happen. Travel as a group to Perth. St Matthew's Church, where it's being held, is right by the river. It's about a 15-minute walk up from the bus station or the train station. It's relatively flat, and it's a lovely place to be. We're trying very hard to make this event as accessible as possible. So we would encourage you to speak to any of the organising group, which could be myself, or it could be Lindsay, or it could be Gemma, or there's Susan Henderson, and there's Mike Holroyd, and have I missed somebody, Lindsay? Jess, who's the newest member to the group. Jess is there as well. If you've got any concerns about accessibility in different forums, then please speak with us. Mike and myself have been to the site and had a walkthrough and to real think about that. Now, we were hoping that Mike would be here today, but the travel was very complicated for him. So what I'd like to share with you, though, is Mike has written a hymn for this day. Lindsay doesn't know this yet, but here we go. I'm going to read you the text of the hymn. You call us to worship together this day, to sing of our joy and to give you our praise, to honour the gift of your grace in our lives and cherish the calling to flourish and thrive. We celebrate all that has shaped us as one, the prayer and the praise and the hard work and fun, the service to neighbour and stranger and friends, the witness to Jesus, the wounded to tend. And still we are called to a radical grace, to seek peace and justice in all that we face. We look for our Saviour to lead us from here. We call on the Spirit to drive away fear. O God, you desire us to find Christ in all, to nourish potential and answer the call. We praise you for all we have still yet to be, caught up in the dance of the blessed Trinity. If you want to sing that, come on the 14th. That and much more wonderful music. It's going to be a really rich day of celebration, a day that recognises we are all in a hard place in lots of ways, and so seeks to affirm and encourage and acknowledge, but it will be a really good day to be out together. There will be opportunities throughout. If children want to come, there'll be opportunities for them, not a designated separate programme, but certainly one workshop and space throughout it. And it should be a really enjoyable day. So please come, be enthusiastic, encourage others to come, and let us gather together on the 14th of June. Should I say anything else, Lindsay? Thank you very much.
Copies of the flyers, the posters, the postcards on this table. If you would like more for your church, please come and help yourself and take them away today.
Thank you, Fiona. We move on in the Synod Executive Report to paragraph 4, which is the appointment of the Safeguarding Administrator, and I call on the moderator to say a few words.
Just to say that I'm delighted to report that the interview panel met a couple of weeks ago, and we have offered the position to somebody who has accepted. We're just doing the final recruitment checks on that, and we're very hopeful that they will begin working with the Synod in mid-April. So that is good news, and we will be having another online meeting for all local safeguarding coordinators late April, May. That was always part of the plan, so there will be an opportunity for safeguarding coordinators to meet our new administrator at that next meeting.
Thank you, moderator. Paragraph 5, there's nothing further to report, but in paragraph 6, it concerns the church constitutions, and I'm asking the moderator again to just remind us.
Yes, thank you. A great deal of work has gone on since we have last discussed this at Synod regarding model constitution templates. Unfortunately, the lawyer at Gillespie McAndrew, who's the Synod's legal advisor firm, has left the firm. That happened at the end of December. And although a new member of staff has been appointed to take this forward, he then went on paternity leave. So we were not able to make the March hoped-for deadline. We have communicated with Gillespie McAndrew that this is, a matter of some urgency, and that what the advice that we have received from the General Secretary of the URC is that Synod should adopt the model templates for use in Scotland, and then that should be confirmed by either a meeting of Assembly Executive or General Assembly. So we're working now for the October Synod meeting to be able to present the templates. If anybody needs help or support with the Constitution before the new templates are ready, please contact me in the first instance. Thank you.
Thank you, Moderator. Returning now to the report, paragraphs 7 and 8, I have no further information to add. But if we now come to paragraph 9, I draw your attention to the list of vacancies that do require everyone's attention. The latest changes are that there are actually 2 further vacancies for Pastoral Committee, not 1. And in the last 48 hours, I have received a nomination for the World Day of Prayer, and which will be followed up as soon as we can after this meeting. Our committees do an awful lot of good work between the 2 Synod meetings, and we do need people to join us in these committees. And so if you do feel able yourself, or you know of somebody that you think could make a contribution, please do either see me while you're here, or please email me personally to the clerk's email address, and I will follow it through. Moderator, that ends my report on any amendments to this executive report. I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay. Thank you. Can, first of all, take any questions to the report generally? I see a hand. Helen, we'll get a microphone to you. It's just coming. Jackie's bringing it.
Can I make a comment? Okay, so Helen Mee, Pastoral Committee. In item 9 in January, 3 new members joined the Pastoral Committee, including Isabel Cormack from Peedy Kirk, and that's not there. That would be good to note that.
Thank you, Helen. We'll make that amendment and ensure Isabel's name is in the committee membership list. Are there any other questions, or I'll take comments on the report? So, I don't see any hands. Can I ask then to use either your orange or blue cards to show whether you're ready to move to a vote on the report? So, orange cards if you are ready, blue cards if you feel there's need for further discussion. So I see only orange cards. Thank you. Then can we now vote using our green cards to accept the report? And hands for those who are online. Thank you. The report is accepted. So we move to the resolutions, which are on the front page of the report. And the first is Resolution 1 concerning safeguarding.
Oh, sorry. Yes, you should have all received the paper S1, which was put together, which gives all the list of the PVG and disclosure instructions, really, for all of us. And so the Resolution 1 is the National Synod of Scotland meeting in March 2025 adopts the changes from the Disclosure Scotland as outlined in the document from General Assembly Executive S1, and that it is brought to the attention of all local churches within the Synod.
Thank you. Can I ask if there's any question or discussion? Question, John?
There's a verb missing.
Well, what we're going to do in the interests of time, because everybody be aware that we have a tight agenda today, is we'll do as they do at General Assembly, where the clerk responds, we'll get that sorted in the minutes. So we'll take any questions of substance rather than questions of vocabulary or language. I know, John, but we will get it sorted in the minutes, okay? Are there any... yes, Ben.
Sorry, Ben Forsyth, Augustine. I just wonder, Disclosure Scotland, who are they?
Is the government or semi-autonomous government body that oversees the completion of criminal record checks for those who are particularly employed working with children or vulnerable groups as defined in legislation. They also oversee the application for criminal record checks for anybody whose employer, for example, may ask them to undertake one.
I just thought I should have remembered, having worked in social work for 25 years, but I had never come across them, to be quite honest.
Are there any other questions or comments on this resolution? Could I ask you to show your orange cards if you're ready to move to a vote? And then green card if you are voting in favour of the resolution. Thank you. I see only green cards. Any against? Thank you. Noted. This is an ongoing conversation that the Synod is having with Disclosure Scotland and other churches on how we properly implement the legislation which comes in force in April 2025. What we have in the paper is correct, but even on Thursday we received new guidance from Disclosure Scotland. So this will be subject of the conversations that I'll be having as I am meeting elders meetings across the Synod this year to make sure people fully understand what the requirements are. Thank you.
Could we have Resolution 2, please? Resolution 2 regards the list of nominees to go to General Assembly for 2025. Now, unusually, there are to be 2 General Assemblies for this year. One in July, the normal, what is normal within the URC. And then we have a second one in November, and the second one will be predominantly about the Church Life Review. But we have been asked that our nominees and representatives to the General Assembly in July are the same people that also attend in the November. So the list that you have in this report, actually these are the people who have committed themselves to attending for both of the General Assemblies. We need your approval to the list of representatives, and so this next resolution is the National Synod of Scotland approves the list of representatives to the 2 General Assemblies for 2025. Thank you, Moderator.
Again, any questions or comments on this resolution? I'm not seeing anybody in the room. Is there anybody online who would like to speak? In that case, I'm just going to go straight to a vote. Could you please show your green cards if you are in favour of this resolution? Thank you. And those online? Thank you. And any against? Okay, the resolution is carried. Thank you.
We now move to the third resolution connected to this report. Between the two Synod meetings, as I've already intimated, the work of the committees continues. There are times when people demit office in the middle of the year for whatever reason, and there are times when we manage to fill posts between the two Synod meetings. And so we encourage those people to join into the committees, bringing their names to the nearest Synod meeting. And so we have two members of the personnel from Pastoral Committee, and also changes to the way that Resources Committee was made up. Two members who just came onto the Resources Committee to represent their local church and their manse have now transferred to being full members, so they will take full committee responsibilities under the resources. And so hence why we've brought this to you, to just make sure that everything is, that you agree to it or approve it.
Thank you, Jan. So Resolution 3, support the change of status of the resources personnel, so that's to approve the appointments of Kenny Brown and John Webster, and the new members of the Synod Pastoral Committee, so that's Nan Maxwell and Isabel Cormack or McCormack? Nomack. Isabel Cormack, and very sadly we note that Lindsay Weir, who did accept an invitation to Synod Pastoral Committee, passed away very unexpectedly last month. So those are the changes. Could I ask if there is any comment or question on Resolution 3? Okay, I'm not seeing anything in the room. Anything online? In that case, could I ask you to vote using your green cards, those who are in favour of this resolution? And online? Thank you. Any against? So Resolution 3 is carried. Thank you. So now we move to the nomination of a moderator for the General Assembly.
Moderator, all the local churches were encouraged to think about sending in a nomination to the clerk's office for moderator of General Assembly. And this is for 2026 to 7. I'm delighted to report that 2 names were forwarded, but one has declined to follow the process through to this stage. The other has agreed to have his name brought before you. Therefore, I bring to the National Synod of Scotland, meeting on the 8th of March of 2025, the name of the Reverend Dr. Mitchell Bunting, known to most of you as Bungie. Now, for this process to go to the next stage, we as a Synod meeting, we are called to cast a vote as to whether we agree to his name being taken forward to the General Secretary. Because in order to process this further, it must come with Synod support. I'm now going to ask if the tellers would please pass out the voting slips. This is a vote that will be by paper, and the tellers will ensure they're coming around to make sure you have a voting paper. They're only little slips, but please do not complete it yet. Don't sit there quickly putting your cross in the box.
Just while the voting slips are being distributed, I'd just like to remind Synod of the rules of procedure when it comes to the election of nominees to serve as moderator of General Assembly. The rules of procedure are clear that we do not have any discussion about this at all. So once the slips are distributed, then we shall join in prayer, and then we shall vote. The tellers shall collect the slips, and we will announce the result later on in the meeting.
Is everybody in possession of a little slip?
Gemma?
Nobody needs it.
Can I have them, please?
In that case, moderator. Oh yes.
Oh, we need one for.
I've got one. In that case, moderator, I call upon you to lead us in prayer.
Sorry, John.
Moderator, I'm slightly confused by the wording of this voting slip. It seems to imply that we are voting Reverend Mitchell Bunting into the post of moderator of the General Assembly rather than him going forward for another vote.
Thank you for that. Yes, just to clarify, what we are doing is making a decision as to whether we wish Bungie's name to go forward as a nominee for the role of moderator of General Assembly. It will be for General Assembly meeting in July 2025 to make a decision as to whether that nomination is accepted. I hope that answers your question. Thank you. I invite you to join in prayer. Lord Jesus Christ, you invite everyone to follow you, and we respond in different ways, at different times, and for different roles and tasks. We give thanks that Bungie has responded to this call to follow you in this way. Guide us in our decision-making as we discern whether we also recognise this call to serve the Church as General Assembly moderator. In your name we pray. Amen.
So will you please cast your votes, and then the tellers will come round with an envelope for you to put your completed slip in. In that case, I think if everybody has put their vote into the envelope, then I thank you very much, and we will let you know the result later on in the meeting. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Jan. That concludes the report of the Synod Executive, and we're going to move swiftly to the Resources Committee report and invite Nick Mark, who's the convener of the committee, to come and present the report. These are in papers B and B1.
Good morning, everyone. I need to thank, first of all, the members of staff who really run this show. Duncan, Sarah, Jackie, and to an extent, although I'm not allowed to say it, Gemma helps a lot with the Resources Committee. I'm saying thank you to you, Gemma, for all the hard work you do. I bring, first of all, before you the Finance and Church Buildings Manses report. One or two things to add to it as we go through. The Energy Crisis Fund, it says 77,000 is still available. That's down to 66 at the last reckoning, but there's still 66,000 to spend. The Minister's Pension Fund, to give you an update on that, there will be no demand on the Synod at all for money with regard to that. The investments are so wonderful, and I say this seriously, are so wonderful, we don't need to make any demand on any of the synods. The sum that has been paid so far of 35,000 should be refunded to us next year. The reason for the caution in not having it back yet is that we may have to pay money to the insurance company who are going to buy out the pension fund. We have something like 5 companies bidding to buy the pension fund, which is good news. Churches' M&M contributions, well, we're going to talk about M&M in a little bit more detail. We were slightly short of our target. Instead of 550,000, we managed 538. And there are good reasons for the 12,000 deficit. On the questions of property, the Carnegie Hill site is progressing well, and we're hoping that will complete by the end of April. Annan is progressing all right at the moment. Stewarton, we're getting quotes now for the toilets. East Kilbride, the situation there is we're getting quotes for the necessary work regarding fire doors, fire alarm, and central heating boiler. Cumbernauld has closed as a building, but the congregation are worshipping now with the Church of Scotland in a room provided by the Church of Scotland. Giffnock. Now, I have to thank Sarah very much for her work on 25 Riverside Gardens. We actually completed the sale yesterday. And it was somewhat of a miracle because they were rather difficult purchasers. We had to reduce the price slightly by £3,000 to cover the cost of the removal of bamboo. This is not... for those of you who are interested in the unique bit about property, it is not Japanese knotweed. This is bamboo. And apparently once you've dug it up, it should never recur. The purchasers demanded money off for the cost of removal. And frankly, to get it through, it was worth doing. On the question of Dunfermline, Priorwood, that's gone through, and the offer of renting 15 Hawthorne Way at Cambuslang has not been taken up as yet. Moving on to the actual church property update, we've more or less covered those, I think. Property manses. There's a good report there, and I don't think there's much to add to those. The one thing that has come up a lot on resources recently is the condition of churches and maintaining their condition. And we've just elected as a full member of resources Kenny Brown, and he's done some very useful work for the resources committee on trying to help churches look at their properties in detail. And also at our recent nominees meeting, the subject was raised of the dreaded quinquennial surveys. And it is now proposed that we reintroduce quinquennial surveys. That's going to have to be discussed at resources, because we fully appreciate that when you employ a structural surveyor or any kind of surveyor, they cost money, and real money. So we're going to have to find ways, looking at our budget, of being able to help churches pay for those surveys. A lot of people say, well, gosh, you know, a few £1,000, is it worth it? Well, certainly in my short time on resources, I can say, yes, it is worth it, because we don't want too many more cases of neglect. Now, that sounds as if I'm criticising church members. We acknowledge very much now on resources that an awful lot of churches haven't got the personnel with the expertise to be able to run all the things that government legislation requires. And not only government legislation, it's what the nominees require, because the trustees who own a lot of the buildings are responsible for them, but they can't, sitting in an office in Glasgow, be responsible. They rely very much on the local church, local trustees looking after the buildings. And when you've got some of our average-sized churches where there's only 5 or 6 people trying to cover everything, it's becoming more difficult. And that's clearly something that we've got to look at in resources over the next months, frankly. And we've had some real shocks. I think one of the churches is Priest Hill. And there you've got a wonderful band of people, about 5 people, trying to run a fantastically good community centre, effectively, as well as a church. And it's a struggle. And we've been very grateful to Kenny for the templates that he's produced and the reports he's done on that church. And we're looking to try and help them move forward. I think that's probably all I need to say on those. Has anybody got any questions they want to ask on the reports before I move on to the dreaded subject of M&M?
Were there any questions or any items of discussion on the written reports? Morag Donaldson, we could have a microphone, please. Thank you, Margaret.
Have I missed something?
Thanks. Morag Donaldson, Duke Street. I'm probably just asking a question for clarification, really, but on the list of properties is obviously the man's for Duke Street, but nothing written against it. Is that because it's in A1 condition, or it's not needing a review at this time? Thank you.
As far as I know, it doesn't need a review. I've not had it. But thank you for raising the question. So,
sorry, Steve Alexander, please.
Stephen Alexander, Helensburgh. I'm slightly confused about this survey, because we've just paid quite a lot of money to have a survey for our insurance company. If we do that, does that then cover the need for a survey by somebody else?
I think we need to see the survey, to be honest, before we can answer that question.
What I'll do is I'll get details together and I'll forward them to you so you can see what we paid for and things. Okay.
Thank you. Yeah. I mean, the idea is of these surveys, resources look at our role in the question of today, in the sentiment of today, as giving churches hope. We're not out to sort of close churches, but to try and help them continue and to expand and do mission. But I take your point. Thank you.
I think we have a question from Angela online in Nairn.
Yeah. Angela Quinn, Nairn. Is this survey just for the churches that are owned by Synod?
The answer to that is no.
No.
It is. The idea is that we want every church to have an up-to-date survey. And by up-to-date, we're saying every 5 years. And that, so there are two strands to that. There is a property survey and an electrical survey. And both of those should be done whoever owns the property. On a question, your insurers will require an electrical survey every 5 years. They won't necessarily require a building survey. But frankly, when you look at the age of many of the churches in our synod, a 5-year survey is a necessary thing to do, because it helps the church to spend money now rather than waiting for something to fall down or injure somebody.
Yes, thank you.
Bob. Sorry.
Duncan, would you like to ask your question? Thank you.
Yeah, it's just to clarify what Nick has already said. The two surveys that we've carried out already, and Kenny Brown, who's part of the Resources Committee, has carried them out, who's well qualified to do so. They're basically health and safety surveys, both at Cumbernauld and at Priest Hill. So we're not talking about full structural surveys that we're carrying out in all churches, and both these churches are owned by the Synod. But it was, as Nick has indicated, quite concerning that we've seen the lack of compliance with some health and safety issues when Kenny provided us with his report. So that's the priority at the moment, looking at the health and safety compliance of church buildings, especially when members of the public and obviously the congregation are attending these. So just to clarify that particular aspect, it's not a structural survey that we're carrying out.
Thank you. I mean, the structural survey idea, Duncan, was meant to be an aspiration for us to go back to the system that ran it is getting to be many years ago. It was always a system to have a structural survey done every 5 years. We're looking at getting back to that. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. See any other questions or comments on the report? Bob, sorry. No, I think I'm not quite being able to see who's got a hand up. So Bob was helpfully going like this to let me know that there was somebody on the screen who'd had a hand up. Thank you. I see no other comments or questions. Can we move then to accept this report? If you accept the report, could you please show with your green cards? Thank you. And those online, yeah, I do see some yellow. Thank you. Any against? In that case, we move on to the discussion on Mission and Ministry Fund. Thank you.
My greatest disappointment this morning is that Morag is not online. Because I'm reliably assured she's not. Anyway, sorry, taking this more seriously. the biggest problem, I think, throughout my years of ministry and before as an elder of a church was this awful thing called maintenance of the ministry. Why on earth do we have to pay it? Because we're struggling as churches. All churches are struggling, I think, now, and especially when you look at the news last night and see, some councils are putting the council tax up by a modest 15%. Maintenance of the ministry is an essential requirement to keep the United Reformed Church running. And it isn't just paying your minister or somebody else's minister, or paying for us to have a moderator, or a special category minister, or a church-related community worker. It's about running the whole operation of the United Reformed Church. And people say, when they're running their local church, well, we don't need to contact London, do we? Well, the answer is yes. In our modern world of litigation, we now have to have a legal officer in London. We're now employing a governance officer, all of whom you may say, well, what do we need that for? Well, in Scotland, you have a wonderful organisation called OSCR. In England, you have a wonderful organisation called the Charity Commission. Now, some people regard them as their enemies. They're actually our friends in terms of trying to make sure that monies are spent correctly and that kind of thing. We also have in London the operation of safeguarding, numerous other committees, and all that needs a backup staff. And so the maintenance of the ministry is the figure which pays for thousands of different things that the URC does. And the issue has come that we've reached a point now where the current system running in Scotland is not working, because we will just about scrape the 550,000 we've been asked to pay this year. But it was clear from the work last year that it was a question of scraping our way towards it. And also the system, as it is now, of pledges, doesn't seem to be working fairly in terms of 2 or 3 churches pay a massive proportion of that 550,000. And we've looked at different ways. We had a very useful consultation with treasurers at which people thought about what they should do and how we could do things. And we came back to the thing of, well, let's just stick with the current system. Well, it will work for this year, as far as we're aware. But the question is, what's going to be necessary for 2026, sorry. And the answer is, we need to come up with a fairer system. The system is going to have to be twofold, because if you're in an LEP, that's already sorted out. Complicated negotiations have gone on for years, and I think it's only Duncan and the treasurer of the Church of Scotland who actually understand how that works, because I certainly don't. And I've never understood how the system works in England either for LEPs, but it does. The question is churches that are not LEPs and how we contribute towards paying the maintenance of the ministry. Because there used to be a time when if you were happily sitting in London as the treasurer, you never worried about paying the stipends for all these people each month. Now it becomes critical. And I'm not releasing any information I shouldn't by saying that for 2024, the URC in London is going to have a deficit of £1.25 million. And so it's not just the National Synod of Scotland that are struggling with MOM, it's every synod. And Duncan went to a lot of trouble when he did the presentation to the treasurers last year of how other synods are doing it. And I don't think anybody has yet come up with the right idea. So what we wanted to do today was to ask in your round tables to spend 10 minutes chatting to each other to see if anybody can come up with a system that would be acceptable for us to invite people, how we invite churches to contribute. I mean, one idea I formulated was that we make a block charge per paying person in a church. At the moment, I mean, there's all sorts of systems where you can say, well, we'll charge per member. But a lot of churches have an awful lot of people who aren't members. And one idea I'd thought of was simply carrying out a kind of survey of all our churches to see how many people there are who actually pay into the running of that church and work out some sort of per head calculation. So I invite you for 10 minutes to sit and chat among yourselves to see if we can come up with any ideas. We're not going to make a vote today, but we are going to have to come up with a very firm resolution at the next synod so that we can work out a calculation for next year.
Thank you, Nick. You'll see the wording of the question the Resources Committee is offering to us on the screen. Folk who are joining us via Zoom will be invited to go into a Zoom room, a breakout room, in the next few moments. Can I ask, on your tables, you will see that there's a sheet of paper with some red text. If somebody could take notes and note down anything from your conversation, and if these could be handed back to the clerk at lunchtime, that would be appreciated. And similarly, if anybody in the online rooms could take notes and email them to the clerk, that would be very helpful. So we will have 10 minutes and come back together at 25 past, as it is on the clock that I am looking at. Thank you. welcomes all strangers and friends. God's love is strong and it never ends. If you can be bringing your conversation here in the room to a conclusion, the folks who have been in breakout rooms are back with us again. So thank you for sharing in that discussion time. We're not going to have opportunity for feedback now, but if all the responses are given to Jan over the lunch break, these will be typed up and circulated with the minutes so that everybody who receives the minutes of Synod will receive all the notes of conversations that have been undertaken. And this is an ongoing conversation which will happen with Synod treasurers, with the Resources Committee, and we'll come back to the October Synod meeting, as Nick has suggested, with, we expect, resolutions about how we might make our contribution to the Ministry and Mission Fund from 2026 onwards. So thank you everybody for the conversation. Thank you to Nick for presenting the report and to those members of the Resources Committee for all their work. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. We have just a moment before we move to the Pastoral Committee report. So we're going to announce the result of the vote for the nomination of Reverend Mitchell Bunting as moderator of General Assembly 2026-2027.
There were 71 slips completed. One was spoilt. 70 of you put a cross in the yes box. So Bungie's name will be forwarded to the General Secretary of the United Reformed Church. Please hold Bungie in your prayers as the process continues towards General Assembly in July. Now, this doesn't mean that he is the new moderator. There is a process to go through. Bungie will be informed that his nomination from here is going forward, and that is as far as we will hear until the papers are submitted for General Assembly. Thank you, Moderator.
Thank you. So we move to the committee, the report of the Pastoral Committee, which is paper C in your papers, and invite Ewan Harley, the convener, to present the report.
Thank you, Moderator. So this report covers the work of the Pastoral Committee in the year since Pastoral Committee last reported. So I'll go through the report briefly and highlight a few points and give you some updates. Highlight the fact that the committee has met 8 times in a year. So I have to thank my fellow committee members for their dedication to this task. We didn't aim to meet 8 times in the year, but we had urgent pastoral issues to discuss, and we also spent 2 additional meetings discussing the difficult question of deployment of stipendiary ministry across the Synod. So just a few updates on the local church news, paragraph 3. It was noted that the Giffnock Church Hall suffered significant damage in Storm Éowyn, along with my house roof. and my car, since the roof landed on the car. However, I was recently informed by GiftNet representatives that they have had a very positive experience with the insurance company, and that repairs were going ahead, and they had a completion date expected. The paragraph about Cumbernauld, the update is that the Cumbernauld church meeting decided that they would move out of the building and continue worship as noted in the report. There has been a review of the North Lanarkshire Trinity pastorate, and I can report that the final meeting of this review process will take place on the 13th of March. As noted, there are 3 currently declared vacancies in the Synod: the North of Clyde, Lanarkshire South and Grahamston United, which is our additional post that we gained through the application for one of the new tranche of ecumenical posts offered by General Assembly. So we're very pleased about that. Under paragraph 8, lay preaching, Pastoral Committee did gather information about who was leading worship across the Synod, Sunday by Sunday. And we agreed that this has been very valuable information, and the exercise would be repeated. So it will gather information about the period covering Easter 2024 to Easter 2025. Paragraph 11 notes that Our Church, Our Faith, Our Work process really hasn't worked as well as it should have. And this was largely due to difficulties in finding sufficient volunteer reviewers to run this process. Meanwhile, General Assembly has come up with a streamlined version of the LMMR process. Discussing this is technically, I think, joint work that has to be done between the Mission Committee and the Pastoral Committee. So this work will go on this year, and I hope we will have something more definite to tell you by the autumn Synod meeting. The resolution that comes with this report is about review of ministry, ministry of word and sacrament. And this doesn't mean that Pastoral Committee does not give great value to other forms of ministry in our Synod. The ministry of church-related community work, the ministry of lay preachers, other church leaders, and the ministry of elders. But we have spent a lot of time on discussing how ministry of word and sacraments is deployed across the Synod. This has been a difficult area over the years. If I could have the first slide, please. So this reminds us of what's happened in this discussion in recent years. Some of you may have been involved in this discussion in 2015, when the model of clusters was introduced. It was hoped that clusters would do many things, and some of these things may have happened and some may not. It was hoped that clusters would enable a shared sense of mission and a sharing of ministry priorities. as well as a shared sense of the resources available within the cluster and some sort of shared sense of how deployed ministry would be used in the cluster. So certainly there's a feeling across the Synod and within the clusters that this may not all have, some of this happened, some of this didn't. And there perhaps has been some unhappiness in clusters that the clusters haven't worked out as they should. There was a recent piece of work done by Southside Cluster, Glasgow Southside Cluster, along with Faith and Community Scotland, and that would appear to confirm that clusters haven't worked out as was originally hoped. Part of this, of course, may have been due to lack of ministry of word and sacraments resource, and this brings us back to what we're talking about. So that was 2015, and then 2018, further work produced and adopted. So over this time, deployment has continued to be a major force of pastoral committee work. And if I could have slide 2, please. 2019, Pastoral Committee set up a deployment subgroup and agreed a deployment policy. 2020, the Transition Champion, now the Transition Minister, facilitated a synod-wide consultation with meetings of local church representatives, mainly church secretaries and ministers. So where has this got us to? Could I have slide 3, please? So I may have to give you an interpretation of this slide for those who can't see it clearly, or I may have to ask a colleague to interpret it for me. So it shows an older person in a wheelchair, dancing, I would say. The music is on in the background, and the older person with the light behind them has created a silhouette. So perhaps the silhouette is what we're aiming at, and the dancing in the wheelchair gives some idea of the struggle that we're undergoing to reach our aim. So Pastoral Committee did meet in January and spent a full day talking about these challenges, discussed the deployment challenges that exist across the whole of the URC. It's not just a problem in Scotland. Looked at different models that are being used, different strategies, innovation, including clustering. And our conclusion at the moment, although obviously this is work in progress, is that, first of all, one size doesn't fit all. Despite what's been said about policies being set, largely we have to be pragmatic and we have to use opportunities as they present themselves. And all the time we have to support mission and ministry in different contexts, and we do have a range of contexts in our synod. So, moderator, that is where we've got to in our discussion, and of course we have the resolution attached to this paper. So I will stop at this point.
Thank you, Ewan. I'm going to suggest that we move to any questions or a discussion on the pastoral report as a whole, minus the topic of the resolution, and then we will come back to the specific resolution about the review of clusters once we've concluded the discussion of the report and accepted that. So, are there any questions or comments on any of the information in the report? John Sanderson and then James Patron-Bell at the back.
John Sanderson, Rosslyn URC. I'm very conscious that it was over 20 years ago that I was first asked to be involved in a group looking at deployment. And we've been looking at deployment for well over 20 years. We seem to go round and round in circles. And I suppose my question is, should we not just accept that we'll never come up with a model for deployment, and that we should just deal with situations as they arise, rather than spending countless hours trying to come up with a model when we've taken 20 years and we haven't managed it yet?
James Patron Bell was at the back, and then Brian Kirkwood, who's just next to him.
James Patton Bell from the Methodist Church. I read with interest the appendices to the report on the pioneer ministry. It is something we in the Methodist Church are also exploring at the moment and have similar structures. I'm also aware our brothers and sisters in the Church of Scotland have the Seeds for Growth Fund. In the circuit I serve in, we are looking at a joint project between ourselves and the Church of Scotland, where some of our training and support for a pioneer post is being brought, and the funds hopefully coming from Seeds for Growth. So could I just encourage, if you're looking at this, talk to your ecumenical neighbours, talk to nearby churches. They may not, as the church that I have care of nearby, have the resources, the people, or the ability, due to age and situation, to do it. But our national structures have the resource which can be brought. So where we can bring our tools and things together, it uses what we have been given by God for ministry and mission well, and saves us duplicating it.
Thank you. Brian, please.
Brian Kirkwood, lay preacher, Cumbernauld URC. I just want to express my thanks and gratitude for being a lay preacher, especially a lay preacher, but on the consultations that we have with other lay preachers in my overnight stays, that it does help regenerate your bodies to continue. And I'd just like to thank the Synod for supporting that role in lay preachers. So it is a worthwhile to do.
Thank you, Brian. And Sarah McGrory.
Thank you. I am a lay pioneer minister. I've just completed the Seedbeds course in conjunction with the United Reformed Church and the Congregational Federation and the Centre for Mission. And it encourages us to look at where God is. God's already out there in the community. We just need to be able to open our eyes and see where he is and ask, where does he want us to join in? A lot of the things that I'm hearing, the problems with church buildings and things like that, if we work with the communities around us, not just ourselves, let's look at what we've got in common and see if we can get a better outcome. Some of the work that I'm doing is with a group of ladies at Loch Lomond that go cold water swimming, and Lindsay knows all about this. And we meet up at Loch Lomond. We don't need a building. We've got God's creation to worship in. And we sit, and I was gifted at the end of my course a dozen enamel mugs, and I've got a camper van so we can sit and make tea and coffee and share what we've got in common. Some of the ladies that I work with are witches. Some of them have got other religions. A lot of them have been hurt by the church, but we come together and we share what we've got in common, and they know that I'm a Christian. They know that where that love comes from, and I think we need to do more of that, and I encourage people to look at the pioneering ministry courses that are going on at the moment. Like the gentleman said, joining forces with the Church of Scotland, joining forces with other churches around us. There's not enough of us anymore in each individual church without taking off the labels. We're all Christians. What would Jesus do?
Any other question or discussion on the Pastoral Committee report? I can see everybody online much better now. I don't see anybody though waving their hand, but it's good to see you better. Okay, in that case, can I ask you to show with your orange or blue cards whether we're ready to move to a vote to adopt this report? And if those online could indicate they're ready to move to a vote. Thank you. So using your green cards, could you please indicate to vote to accept the report? And then, so let's see. Green cards in the room and hands raised online. Thank you. The report is accepted. So we move to the resolution, which is on the screen, Resolution 7. Ewan, would you like to say anything further on the resolution?
Yes, thank you, Moderator. I take John's point that do we need a policy at all? But people expect us to have some sort of policy, even if that policy simply states a few basic principles. To a large extent, this review work is underway because we already had the full day meeting of the Pastoral Committee in January. But we feel it's important to do further exploration and do further listening, particularly around the future of clusters.
So the text of the resolution, are there any further questions or comments people would like to share in relation to the resolution, which is particularly to review the cluster model? So I see Fiona and then also James.
Fiona Bennett, Augustine United. I'm very grateful to see this resolution. Along with John, I was part of the discussions back in 2015. I also chaired Pastoral Committee when we as a synod agreed to try the cluster model. Back in 2015, we agreed that we would try the model, but what there was a really strong part of the discussion was and see how it would go, and it's never really been formally reviewed. While I absolutely hear what John is saying, I'm not clear if it was about a single policy or a single model. I'm not sure what word you said, John, actually. Did you say model or did you say policy? It was model, yeah. Which I think is different to a policy. I agree that there is no single model, but I do really think that there is a lot to think about, and that the cluster model should have been reviewed by now. We are 10 years on. My other comment is I think it's really, really important that whatever we come up with, that we as a synod take ownership of it, because we are in complicated times, and I think if we are really to seriously grasp the deployment issue, we need to own it collectively, because it will mean some have and some don't. And we need to be willing to sacrifice for others, actually. So I think it's really, really important that there is collective ownership and a recognition it's going to be costly. Thank you.
And then to James, thank you.
Thank you, Moderator. James Patton Bell from the Methodist Church. Just a request for the review group to keep in mind the commitments made in the EMU agreements around ministry and sharing. Again, where we have scarce resources, where we can bring them together, should help us flourish.
Are there any more contributions? I don't see anybody online. Ewan, I apologise. I realised that I didn't give you the opportunity to respond to the comments and questions that were made about the general report. If we have a minute before lunch, I will let you do that. But would you like now to respond to anything that has been shared in relation to the resolution?
It's very helpful to hear from Fiona about what was happening in 2015, because committees change, so there's not much collective memory sometimes for what's happened not that long ago. And I'm grateful to James for pointing out the EMU dimension in this and how important it is. We will certainly take note of that. Thank you.
Thank you. Could I ask you to indicate with your orange or blue cards whether we're ready to move to a vote on this resolution? Thank you, and I realise that people who are online cannot show both things, so could you put a hand up to show that you're ready to move to a vote? Thank you very much. So using your green cards, those who are in favour of Resolution 7, please show. And those online, I'm seeing hands. Thank you. And any against? Okay. Thank you. The resolution is carried. Thank you very much. Ewan, is there anything you'd like to respond to the comments regarding pioneering that we had from James and Sarah?
Yes, yes. Thanks again to James for pointing out that the Methodist Church is involved in pioneering ministry. And thank you to Sarah for telling us something about her work. The appendix was put in because the lay pioneer category is something new for the URC, and it has been discussed at Pastoral Committee, and we felt that the Synod needed to know what all the practical arrangements are. There is also at General Assembly, although there has been some discussion about using ministers of word and sacraments in pioneer situations, but this discussion has not been concluded yet, so that's slightly different. And thank you also for the positive comments about how lay preachers are supported, and we're very grateful to our lay preaching advocate, Derek MacDonald, for the work he's doing. Thank you, Moderator.
Thank you. I think that concludes the report of the Pastoral Committee, and also concludes the report of our time together in our morning session. So we will take the opportunity to break for lunch now. I'm minded still to begin again at 1:30. Just gives us a little bit more time to stretch our legs, get some fresh air, have our lunch, refill our coffee cups. So we will resume again at 1:30 after lunch. I hope those who are online will be able to rejoin our meeting then. So enjoy your lunch, everybody.
Just as you're going out, if you want to have a look outside, I've been asked by Jess. Sorry, that's not the right word. I have been commanded by Jess. I'm frightened of her. To point out a little thing that's on the corridor as you go out. It's a little piece of paper like this, and there's a little QR code. It's called the Easter Story Trail. Now, you won't all get at it at once. If you go, take your phone and scan the little code, it will take you to somewhere you can then put your picture on the screen, and you'll get a little movie of Lego people, and it takes you through 5 steps. So I've done my job, Jess. Not getting beat up now. Thank you.